West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est long, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
It has been more than 100 days since the January 6th attack on the Capitol, and there still has been zero comprehensive public accounting on exactly what happened that day. For example, Capitol Police initially said that fallen officer Brian Sicknick was injured while physically engaging with protesters. And that is what they said the day after the attack. It's how we reported, many did, day after day for over 3 months. Until the Washington, D.C. medical examiner ruled this week that Officer Sicknick died of natural causes. According to the medical examiner, Sicknick suffered 2 strokes and showed no evidence of internal or external injuries, though the medical examiner did note that all that transpired played a role in Sicknick's condition. And we know, not from the medical examiner, but from some incredible New York Times reporting, that Sicknick was sprayed with some kind of substance, most likely bear spray, by the attackers on January 6th. But that's a perfect example of what I'm finding frustrating about January 6th. Almost everything we've learned about the events those days has come from the sources off the record or court filings or journalists scraping through video or leaked details from closed-door briefings and internal documents. Yesterday, for example, in a hearing about the attack, Democratic Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren of California revealed new details about a message that went out to Capitol Police officers the morning of the 6th.
So if an officer said in one of the reviews on the morning of January 6th, and this is a quote, a radio broadcast was sent to all outside units, attention, all units on the field were not looking for any pro-Trump in the crowd. We're only looking for any anti-pro-Trump who wants to start a fight.
Now, the Capitol Police pushed back on that today, issuing a statement saying that this was one of many different back and forths throughout the day. Congressman Lofgren said the key detail came from an internal investigation. But again, we learn of this from a hearing. Capitol Police try to push back. And so what are we to make of it? So far, the only public report we've gotten since January 6th is that 13-page security review from retired Lieutenant General Russell Honore. That's helpful information for the future, but it's not good enough. We still do not have an official TikTok of the events of that day, and we need it. Nearly 20 years ago when this country, very famously, came under attack, we formed a national commission to fully investigate what happened. And the 9/11 Commission produced a more than 500-page report, a public, comprehensive accounting of exactly what happened. That is the kind of investigation and work product we need to understand what happened on January 6th and to move forward. Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, Democrat of New York, is the chair of the House Democratic Caucus, a member of the House Judiciary Committee, and he joins me now. Congressman, where does this commission stand right now?
Well, we are moving forward to try to arrive at common ground with the Republicans so we can form a bipartisan commission that can comprehensively study the events of January 6th and the events leading up to January 6th, including the radicalization that perhaps led to the mob storming the Capitol that day, and then prepare a comprehensive report, as you've articulated, that was done in connection with 9/11 and report to the American people. And the Speaker has made clear that it's important for it to be bipartisan, but that, of course, requires an agreement in good faith with the other side of the aisle. To try to reach that agreement, she's indicated that we're willing for the commission to be evenly split between Democrats and Republicans, and for the chair, which would be a Democratic appointment, and the vice chair, presumably a Republican appointment, to jointly have the ability to issue subpoenas as opposed to simply the chair having unilateral authority. The major area of disagreement right now seems to be on the scope, Chris, because the Republicans, to some degree, are in fantasy land as it relates to their wish lists as to what the scope of the commission should be.
I want to read just to reiterate this idea. So, this is a fairly standard kind of setup for these sorts of things, right? Evenly split, chair, vice chair, some sort of agreement for subpoenas. Pelosi has agreed to make the panel evenly split between Democrats and Republicans to change the way subpoenas would be issued, requiring a joint decision by the chair and vice chair, or after a majority vote. Tell me what the scope debate is.
So our view is that the commission should be focused on the events of January 6th, the violent attack on the Capitol, the incitement of an insurrection, the perpetration of the big lie, and the role that it played in the radicalization that we saw manifest itself by the storming of the Capitol. That's fairly straightforward. The events of 9/11 were the scope of the 9/11 Commission, not a whole host of other conspiratorial views or political fantasies that some may have had at the time. Right now, Leader McCarthy has indicated that he wants the scope of this commission to include the Black Lives Matter protests that took place in the summer of 2020. He wants it to include Antifa and the fact that
whoa. He wants the January 6th commission to include Black Lives Matter?
That's correct. And he, in fact, Chris, if you can believe it or not, said that at his press conference today. This is not political hyperbole. This is his negotiating position. It's an embarrassment and it's a joke. And it's just not going to happen. And so we're committed to trying to find common ground. Hopefully, some reasonable folks on the other side of the aisle will step in, and it will become clear that Kevin McCarthy's position is untenable.
I have to say, I understand this partisan wrangling and the ridiculous bad faith of McCarthy there. My interest as a journalist, as someone who's been covering this, is I've just found the level of transparency wholly inadequate and maddening. I mean, we've found out about a person who died from a local news package that happened from a sibling who reported it. And then we find out about this person who's in a Trump administration official because of either caught on video or there's a court filing. All of it just comes out in these different streams. And that's how we find out about this very important thing. No one was out there the next day doing the kind of briefing you see after huge mass casualty events or big things. I mean, it has been crazy to me how terrible the communication of information about this thing that we all witnessed has been.
It is Friday, the 23rd of April of 2021. And you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. And our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Well, folks, for those of you who follow me on social media, you got some of the word of about the tragedy in my extended family. Occurred the evening before last. My 20-year-old grandnephew was, well, we don't know what. Was he murdered? Was it an accident? All we know is that the kid is dead from a gunshot to the face at work during business hours. at a national auto supply parts chain or auto parts supply chain. So OSHA is involved because there was a manager on duty. And it's I called it salacious when I heard the news. Initially, there was some concern about whether the kid might have self-inflicted. And then the excuse was that, well, they were just playing around and the gun fell and it shot him. And the initial investigations pretty much put the lie to that. The angle of the gunshot wouldn't have come from either self-inflicted or if a gun was able to be fired off after dropping to the ground. And apparently there was another gun involved and it has disappeared. Presumably now, there are security camera footage, maybe. When a manager's involved, what would they know where to go where the cameras aren't? I should also mention there was alcohol involved, yes, during business hours. And with, was the manager, a couple of underage employees, in which my grandnephew was one. And I should add also, I didn't have a whole lot of interaction. This fellow is on my first wife, my ex-wife's side of the family. And though we all get together for all the holidays because, we've been grandparents for a long time. And before that, we were parents. So long ago, we put our animosities aside so that we would be parents. And we have been actively involved, or had been actively involved in our late son's life pretty much on a daily basis. And all holidays. And so, that's how it is. But this is my sister-in-law's daughter's child, or stepchild, actually. So even more removed. But because of holidays, I'd seen the kid around. And he's the age of my grandson. So all the kids are torn up about it, of course, because they spent a lot of time growing up with each other. So, yes, back to the weird story about all of this. So the couple of underage employees, my grandnephew is one, the manager, who is an adult, and then several of what was described as non-employees. Not customers, non-employees. And they were drinking. And then they decided to bring out the guns, and I don't know why. Was it because of an anger issue? Was it showing off? But nonetheless, nobody knows nothing. Somebody fired off a round into my grandnephew's face, and nobody knows nothing. That's called gun fail, right? And you never think gun fails. Well, you hope, actually. You hope gun fail doesn't come up and gun fail you. And here it is. Can't escape it. Not even a couple of degrees separated. Well, maybe a couple. But family is family. And it's too damn close. We have too many guns in the hands of too many idiots. I did also put out on social media, and let's be clear. I'll just be clear. My grandnephew liked guns. And I cannot tell you how many members of the family. I will say that immediate family, my sister-in-law's daughter, what does that make her? Anyway, I guess, yeah, a niece. Of course, a niece. They tended towards, shall we say, the orange end of the political spectrum, if you know what I mean. And I don't mean Danish, okay? I mean, you know who. orange hair, orange pancake makeup. That guy. So try to keep guns out of kids' hands, and the GOP just keeps putting them back in their hands. Try to keep the guns out of the hands of idiots, and the GOP just keeps putting the guns back into the hands of idiots. So you hope gun fail doesn't touch you. And when it does, you hope it doesn't touch anybody else. All right. So when we get more information, and also I should add that information that we have is subject to change also, because it is still early on in the investigation. But I presume that there's going to be a lot of, shall we say, shit come down. And there will be an accounting, obviously. Okay, so at the top, the GOP is just doing their same old, same old. I mean, they'll put guns back into the hands of idiots. So why would they want to be investigated for their part in the January 6th insurrection? They will try to cover it up. Nobody knows nothing. And what better way than to investigate a couple of groups who had nothing to do with the insurrection? Okay. Well, that's how it works. That's how the Nazis get away with it. I keep telling everybody, don't negotiate with terrorists, and definitely don't negotiate with Nazi terrorists. Only bad will come from it, and this is where we are, in a bad place. Jets get flown into our buildings. We have an investigation. An insurrection occurs on the day that the Electoral College certifies the election, and that insurrection occurs to turn over the election, therefore turning over the government of the United States in a violent insurrection, and there is no accounting. And if there is going to be an accounting, it won't be for the perps. It'll be for and against the groups that the perps hate. I don't remember Nazis being consulted about how the Nuremberg trials would be conducted. I know those were under completely different circumstances. They had been beat to a pulp, I know. But is that what we have to do? Beat the GOP to a pulp before we can have an accounting? And then they have the audacity, the gall, to fly the American flag as if it is theirs and theirs alone. How dare they? How dare they? Well, I got that off my chest. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? The ACLU is defending a group of Central Oregon activists from the city of Bend over public records access, because it turns out that Bend is pretty damn conservative, maggot even. The president, and you know which one, the only one. We never called Trump the president here at Networks Radio. In fact, our style manual stipulated the P word would never be applied to that guy. It's so wonderful to be able to go back to calling the president of the United States the president of the United States. Well, our president has nominated a longtime Montana environmentalist to head the Bureau of Land Management. And it's making the GOP's heads explode. Almost like at a gender reveal party. Which reminds me, with all these anti-protest laws being enacted, does that mean that we can drive through a gender reveal party because we feel threatened? God, I hope so. And Josh Hawley was the only Senate vote against the bill to fight hate crimes against Asians because he felt it went too far. Yeah, he's a Nazi. After the break, we move to the chef's table where at least 31 indigenous people were hurt in Colombia following an armed attack as they eradicated coca crops. Yes, cocaine. And Russia ordered its troops back to base after the massive buildup near the Ukraine. Oh, Vlad was rattling his sabers like North Korea does for every new administration to see how they'll act. And guess what? Vlad is retreating. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the right of the page, is our chat room link, and the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of that chat room link, near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, is the link to our Patreon page. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and possibly send us the equivalent of what you might spend on a hey, how about an espresso-type coffee drink? That's what I always use as an example. If you could afford to send those funds to us once a month, that allows us to pay our bills and fly under the radar and continue this powerhouse of resistance that has been resisting for 10 years now. It is our 10-year anniversary. It's our birthday. Happy birthday to us. We've been able to do this because of folks like you, and thank you to those of you who have been so generous and even increased your monthly patronage here to us at Netroots Radio. It has come at a very precipitous time, and we are still cobbling together the hardware, machinery, the software, and all the other aspects of the production part of Netroots Radio that allows us and causes us, makes us the powerhouse of resistance that we have all come to know and love over all these many years. 10 of them, as a matter of fact. Thank you. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, do so at Netroots Radio. And if you... Tom takes care of the Twitter account. Thank you, Tom. Thank you. And he does a lot more as well. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime and get that posted up on Twitter and other social media platforms. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Okay. We've been having a bit of an issue here in our little hamlet of Rogue River. During the height of the racial inequality protests that came to be known as the Black Lives Matter protests for some reason, because of the killing of George Floyd and all the others that have occurred from time immemorial, meaning even before the beginning of our great United States, the killing of black people. There was a meme going around that Antifa, busloads of Antifa, were going to come in to little towns all over the Northwest, and people were just all up in arms about it, and they were so afraid. They were going to get their guns and go on the bridge and keep Antifa from coming across the bridge into our town. My God. So apparently what happened is that wasn't an isolated incident. During the protest, apparently Fox News watchers in the Northwest sent police departments, FBI, every kind of law enforcement official on wild goose chases all over the Northwest. And I just remember how up in arms people here in my little hamlet of Rogue River were about Antifa, the commies, and Black Lives Matter. And don't call them racist. Don't call them fascists. Don't call them Nazis, even though they flash the Pepe symbol. They run off the Southern Oregon Racial Equality Group, who were invited to speak at a Thursday workshop in Rogue River. And the police chief and maggots ran them off because there is no systemic racism. It doesn't exist, and we proved it. Yeah. So, of course, people here are up in arms about the pandemic. It doesn't exist. It's ignorant people like me that ruin it for everybody else. Because they can't have their yearly parade where they get to sell the Dixie swastika, by the way. They fly the Dixie swastika during a parade called Rooster Crow. I asked about that once, and you would not believe the violent rhetoric directed at me that caused them to report me for harassment. Because I caused them to direct this hateful, violent rhetoric my way. It wasn't the rhetoric that they made. It was me that caused it. Yeah, the victim. Now, I don't call myself a victim, but still, this is how it works. So ignorant people like us ruin it for everybody else because we don't want people to get sick. All right. Well, that kind of got me a little discombobulated. All right, well, let's get into this first offering because I think it is also endemic to a certain mindset in Oregon, pretty much the rural parts. There must be something in the water. You know, I kind of always purify my water. Not only kind of, I do. Because you don't really want to trust even the pipes in your house, really. I don't. Especially if they've been of a certain age, no matter what they say on the building permits. I just don't. It's not just the pipes, it could be the fittings, it could be anything. So I like to put my water through a purifier, just because I do. And maybe that's why those of us who do so haven't been so susceptible to the brainwashing. I don't know what it is. Emily Curitan of Oregon Public Broadcasting does bring us this first offering in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The ACLU, we know them as the American Civil Liberties Union, is defending a group of Central Oregon activists from the city of Bend in a lawsuit initiated by the city over public records access. They sued the people requesting public records. Ha! Attorneys working with the ACLU of Oregon filed a counterclaim against Bend on Wednesday. The nonprofit provides legal representation when it considers civil liberties to be at risk. Cooperating ACLU attorney Alan Kessler said the Bend case is about ensuring an essential function of the government. Being able to see the records produced by our government is the only way we can hold it accountable, Kessler said. Our goal here is to be able to take away some of the obstacles that keep people from doing that. Bend wanted to charge several $1,000s to compile the public records requested in January by activist Michael Satcher. The city argued that providing public access to thousands of police and city staff emails required more than 60 hours of work, while Bend normally budgets just 2 hours a week to handle public records requests. Last month, Deschutes County District Attorney John Hummel ordered the city to waive its fees. Now, let's remind ourselves, municipalities, especially those of a certain kind that, lean towards fascism, always add on these erroneous fees to public records requests because they don't want you to have them. They want to make you jump through hoops. You think this is a democracy? They want to make it a business. Bend's attorney, Mary Winters, said in a statement that the case is about undoing that order because of the example it sets. We think the district attorney substituted his judgment for the cities and created a new standard for this and future fee waiver requests that is contrary to state law, Winters wrote. instead of providing those records with a fee waiver as ordered by the district attorney, the city sued community member Michael Satcher and the Central Oregon Peacekeepers, the ACLU said in a press release. The Peacekeepers formed last year around street protests after the murder of George Floyd by a police officer in Minnesota. The group's members have lately sought access to public records as a way to watchdog local law enforcement. We're just seeking the truth, and the city is coming after us for it, the group's president, Luke Richter, said in the ACLU press release. Winters, the Bend attorney, said the city is not seeking damages, but rather a declaration from the judge about how to interpret Oregon's public records laws. If the city wins the case, the Peacekeepers could owe around $3,600 in fees to obtain the requested records, many of which have already been released. The ACLU's counterclaim seeks to recoup its legal costs from the city. Matthew Brown of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. President Joe Biden has nominated a longtime environmental advocate and Democratic aide to oversee the vast expanses of federally owned land in western states. The latest political appointment raising concerns among Republicans because she doesn't want to rape the land like they do, as Biden moves to curtail energy production from public reserves. Tracy Stone Manning of Missoula, Montana, was nominated yesterday, Thursday, to direct the Interior Department's Bureau of Land Management, which has jurisdiction over about 250 million acres and 1/3 of the nation's underground minerals, including huge reserves of oil, natural gas, and coal. The agency regulates drilling, mining, grazing, and other activities, and is set to play a key role in Biden's commitment announced to cut climate warming emissions from fossil fuels by half by 2030. Stone Manning, age 55, spent the past 4 years at the National Wildlife Federation, where she led the group's efforts to preserve public lands for wildlife, hiking, hunting, and other non-industrial uses. You know, the little people. She previously worked as chief of staff for former Montana Governor Steve Bullock, as an aide to Montana Democratic Senator John Tester, and 3 decades ago as a spokesperson for the activist environmental group Earth First. If confirmed, Stone Manning would serve under Interior Secretary Deb Haaland, a former Democratic congressman from New Mexico, who was confirmed over opposition from Republicans, citing her criticisms of the oil and gas industry. You know, there were criticisms of the whale oil industry, and the whale oil industry responded and reacted in very similar ways to how the Republicans are responding now. Isn't that funny? The confrontations resemble political fights that took place over many of former President Trump's appointees. He's former president, so we'll call him that. Only now it's environmentalists and progressive activists under scrutiny versus the industry lobbyists favored by Trump. Stone Manning opposed Trump's drilling-friendly policies as destructive to public lands and said in 2019 that the Republicans' agenda had thrown the balance between conservation and development out of whack. A spokesperson for Montana Senator Steve Daines, who sought unsuccessfully to block Deb Haaland's nomination, said Republicans would be looking closely at Stone Manning's years as an environmental activist and her ties to conservation groups that poured money into the 2020 election. Well, you know what? How about if we look at the rubles that went into the Republican coffers? How about we look at that? Tester said in a statement that Stone Manning was a tireless public lands champion with a lifetime of experience who would bring much-needed change to the Land Bureau. Mary Claire Jelinek of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. The Senate yesterday, Thursday, overwhelmingly passed a bill that would help combat the rise of hate crimes against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, a bipartisan denunciation of such violence during the coronavirus pandemic, and a modest step toward legislating in a chamber where most of President Joe Biden's agenda has stalled. The measure would expedite the review of hate crimes at the Justice Department and provide support for local law enforcement in response to thousands of reported violent incidents in the past year. Police have noted an uptick in such crimes, including the February death of an 84-year-old man who was pushed to the ground near his home in San Francisco, a young family that was injured in a Texas grocery store attack last year, and the killing of 6 Asian women in shootings last month in Atlanta. The names of the 6 women killed in Georgia are listed in the bill, which passed the Senate on a 94-1 vote. Biden applauded the measure, tweeting, "Acts of hate against Asian Americans are wrong, un-American, and must stop." The House is expected to consider similar legislation in the coming weeks. Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii, the legislation's lead sponsor, said the measure is incredibly important to Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders who have, quote, often felt very invisible in our country, always seen as foreign, always seen as the other, end quote. She said, the message of the legislation is as important as its content and substance. Hirono, the first Asian American woman elected to the Senate, said the attacks are a predictable and foreseeable consequence of racist and inflammatory language that has been used against Asians during the pandemic, including slurs used by former President Donald Trump. It is unclear whether the bipartisan bill is a sign of things to come in the Senate, where Republicans and Democrats have fundamental differences and often struggle to work together. Well, that usually happens when it's, the allies against the Nazis. Only one Republican, Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, voted against the bill. In a statement, Hawley said he believed the legislation was too broad and, quote, my view is it's dangerous to simply give the federal government open-ended authority to define a whole new class of federal hate crime incidents, end quote. Representative Grace Meng, a Democrat from New York, introduced a similar bill in the House, which she says is expected to be considered in May. For more than a year, Asian Americans all across our nation have been screaming out for help, Meng said, and the Senate showed that they heard our pleas. Just not from Josh Hawley. Okay, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, dementia you won't forget. While Hollywood spends fortunes conjuring horrors to frighten us out of our seats, the prospect of losing one's mind, one's grip on reality, may trump them all. And not far behind might be watching it happen to a loved one. In Florian Zeller's The Father, we get both perspectives, that of Anthony, with Anthony Hopkins in the title role, and that of his daughter Anne, as his caregiver, played mostly by Olivia Colman. I'm not using the term perspectives lightly here. From the stage where this one originated, Anthony's deterioration isn't just documented, the entire narrative shifts to his reality, which is capriciously distorted or lucid, but always changing. There are subtle modifications in the set. Characters he perceives are different actors. Seasons aren't consistent. Is this a gimmick? To my mind, the difference between an effective dramatic technique and a gimmick is whether its contribution is both positive and imperceptibly subsumed into the project. Here, it works, thanks to an astute script and the two wonderful leads, Hopkins and Coleman, either or both of whom are on screen in almost every scene and who deserve every award they've already received or for which they've been nominated. Superb support comes from Olivia Williams, Imogen Poots, and Mark Gatiss, and it's necessary to mention the aforementioned technique. Bringing Anthony's perspective wouldn't have worked at all without some pretty amazing set design, editing, and cinematography. Films about end-of-life issues can win awards, like 2012's L'Amour, or can misfire, like last year's Capone, but they all summon emotion due to the universality of aging. The Father is movie-making at its best, but the subject matter may not make you feel better about anything other than the fact that there is movie-making this good. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
Hi, and welcome to COVID Quickly, a bi-weekly Scientific American podcast series.
This is your fast-track update on the COVID pandemic. We bring you up to speed on the science behind the most urgent questions about the virus and the disease. We demystify the research, and we help you understand what it really means.
I'm Tanya Lewis.
I'm Josh Fishman.
And we're Scientific American's senior health editors. Today, we're talking about when we'll know if vaccines are safe for kids.
Why Joe Biden's claim that everyone is eligible for vaccines isn't good enough.
And how a tiny country proved that rapid testing can stop COVID spread. Several companies are currently testing their vaccines in kids, as Scientific American contributor Melinda Wenner-Moyer recently reported. Pfizer just announced results showing its vaccine is 100% effective in preventing COVID symptoms in 12 to 15-year-olds. Moderna has been testing its vaccine in 12 to 16-year-olds. Both companies have now begun testing their vaccines in children aged 6 months to 11 years. And Johnson & Johnson announced plans to test its vaccine in children and adolescents as well. We know that kids in general are less likely to get very sick from COVID, but they can still spread the virus to others and can, in rare cases, become severely ill. So vaccinating kids is definitely important.
Then why are we only vaccinating kids now?
Well, companies wanted to make sure their vaccines were safe in adults first before testing them in kids. They also wanted to be certain it doesn't cause a harmful immune response to the disease, which is what happened with a dengue vaccine in the Philippines a few years ago. They also want to get the dosing right. But COVID vaccines could be available to kids aged 12 to 16 as early as this summer, for 5 to 11-year-olds by early next year, and for babies and toddlers sometime after that. On Tuesday, President Joe Biden said that everyone in the U.S. will be eligible for a vaccine on April 19th. But Josh, you don't think that's good enough?
It's not. Being eligible isn't the same thing as actually getting an appointment for a shot. The White House is saying we can all get in a virtual line now. Biden said, no more confusing rules. Well, eligibility rules have not been that confusing. The big mess has been finding an appointment for a shot, even when you are eligible. States have websites, counties have websites, there's CVS, there's Walmart, there's local hospitals and clinics. Hop from one to the other and they keep telling you there are no slots. Then appointments get released in the wee morning hours, and if you don't grab one at 5 a.m., they're gone. The reality is that if you sign onto this virtual line and wait for the magic vaccine genie to hand you an appointment, you may not get one. You have to get very active and hunt through all the different sites yourself.
So have you got a solution in mind?
Well, if there was one centralized place where you could sign up for an appointment, even if it is 2 months from now, you'd know that you're getting your shot. Everyone knew in the fall that we'd have to vaccinate 300 million people. And yes, that's hard. And it's great that we're getting more doses out there. But a reservation system for those doses isn't that hard. Nobody in the Biden administration has explained why we're staying with this haphazard system. People, just regular folks, have come to the rescue here. Vaccine hunter Facebook groups have sprung up in every state. They have dedicated volunteers helping people make appointments and alerting you when a batch of local slots open up. These are amazing people helping their neighbors, and you can find lists of these groups at a website, vaccinehunter.org. So, sure, get in the virtual line, but don't just stand there. If you're eligible for the shot, ask for help and make the effort to get one. Since people are still getting infected, rates are going up in several states, we still need COVID testing. Why is that so important, and could new kinds of testing help?
That's right. Even though millions of people are getting vaccinated in the U.S. every day, the pandemic is far from over. Cases have stopped declining in many states and are starting to tick up again as a result of more contagious variants and relaxing of restrictions. That's why it's so important to keep testing people. I recently interviewed Martin Pavelka, a top epidemiologist in Slovakia, where they rolled out a massive testing program using so-called rapid antigen tests. These are cheaper and simpler to use than PCR tests, albeit slightly less accurate. Slovakia found that rapid testing the majority of its population, in combination with a brief shutdown, helped reduce the prevalence of COVID by nearly 60% late last year. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration just authorized several rapid antigen tests that you can get over the counter. People can use these at home or in other settings and can get results in half an hour or less. These tests could be an important part of getting the country back to normal, whatever that means. Now you're up to speed. Thanks for joining us.
Come back in 2 weeks for the next episode of COVID Quickly, and check out SciAm.com for updated and in-depth COVID news.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Can an air freshener kill you? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. You know, one of those tree-shaped thingamabobs that dangle from the rear-view mirror of cars. A majority of states have laws that prohibit an object near a windshield from obstructing a driver's view. But what actually makes an air freshener dangerous is not that it might obstruct the driver's view, but rather that cops can use the air freshener as a pretext to stop the car. Air fresheners, dice, the wrong tin on a windshield, dirt on a license plate allegedly obscuring a number or a letter, a rear license plate light or a tail light being out, an expired inspection sticker or registration tag. There are so many alleged minimal infractions that can be used as a pretext for a traffic stop by an armed police officer. Those low-level traffic infractions, studies prove, disproportionately target people of color, and they should not be handled by police officers at all. The costs far outweigh the benefits. The traffic stops too often lead to an interrogation in order to step out of the car, a pat-down or a frisk, a search, escalation, and, as in the case of Dwante Wright in Minneapolis, a shooting and death. And so we hold these truths to be self-evident. There are too many deaths of drivers and passengers, disproportionately people of color, caused by unnecessary traffic stops. And use of an air freshener should not prove fatal. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day 1,800 auto workers sat down at the Ford Motor Plant in Richmond, California. It was the largest Ford plant on the West Coast. The UAW organizing drive at Ford had just begun a few weeks earlier with a sit-down strike in Kansas City. Company manager Clarence Bullwinkle reported he had returned from lunch only to find the plant occupied and all the power shut off. Workers began their occupation after 12 workers with seniority rights had been transferred from the assembly plant to the loading department and then discharged. Strikers voted to allow company officials and office workers to leave the plant but not return. Bullwinkle was told to get out and stay out until you meet our demands. He refused to budge and holed up in his office. Demands included recognition of the union, seniority rights, and regular pay instead of discharge for workers who are out sick or injured on duty. As the night shift arrived and then left, they passed their lunch buckets in solidarity to the striking workers. Within 12 hours, the strike was reportedly called off after Ford officials agreed to meet with strikers. Seeing this as tantamount to winning union recognition, workers paraded through the streets in the early hours of Saturday morning. But they hit the picket lines later that day when Ford officials failed to appear. By Monday, they were right back on the job. Fearing another day's loss of production, Ford officials met with union leaders. While workers did not win formal recognition, they did win seniority rights and recognition of the Shop Stewards Committee in a first step toward union recognition, which would come 4 years later.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is 42 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs only in the low 70s, could be even the upper 60s. A mix of clouds and sun during the morning will give way to cloudy skies this afternoon, winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing with it showers this evening, becoming a steady light rain overnight. Lows in the low 40s with winds out of the west at 10 to 15 miles per hour, and we're expecting something less than a quarter of an inch overnight. But then tomorrow, it looks like we'll have highs in the mid-50s, rain showers early with over skies later in the day, and winds will be out of the west-southwest at 10 to 15 miles. And we are expecting a drop tomorrow of something less than a quarter of an inch, but we are expecting more than a quarter of an inch dropping on Sunday. Maybe light rain Monday and Tuesday, and then picking up again on Wednesday. We need rain around here, and we look at it kindly. Grass pollen is rated as high right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 27 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is high and is notched up to 6. Barometric pressure is still holding steady at this morning at 30.01 inches. Visibility, though, is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is at 78%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that are crowdsources from around the world. London is 60 degrees and sunny. Paris is 67 and sunny. Rome is 68 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 52 degrees and fair. Kabul is 64 and fair. Hong Kong is 75 and clear. Tokyo is 55 and partly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 60 degrees and clear. San Francisco, California is 50 degrees and mostly cloudy. And New York is 50 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Anonymous staff at Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. At least 31 indigenous people were wounded in southeast Colombia yesterday, Thursday, after an illegal armed group, well, you would think they'd be illegal, opened fire on them while they destroyed crops of coca. The attack took place in the rural municipality of Caldona in Colombia's Cauca region or province. The region is strategically important for drug trafficking and is disputed by armed groups, including dissidents of the demobilized FARC guerrilla group, the National Liberation Army, and other criminal organizations made up of former right-wing paramilitaries. Former right-wing paramilitaries and cocaine. What could go wrong? So far, 31 indigenous people have been reported injured, and 5 attackers have been detained by the Indigenous Guard, the Regional Council of Indigenous in the Cauca region said in a statement. Efforts to eradicate coca crops and attacks against members of the community are ongoing, meaning the number of injured could rise, describing indigenous communities in the region as victims of state absence. Illegal armed groups fight for territorial control of strategic areas for growing coca and the production of cocaine. On Tuesday, Indigenous Governor Sandra Liliana Peña, who opposed coca crops in indigenous lands, was assassinated in the same region.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Tom Balmforth and Matthias Williams from Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. Russia announced on Thursday yesterday it was ordering troops back to base from the area near the border with Ukraine, apparently calling an end to a buildup of tens of thousands of soldiers that has alarmed the West. The currencies of both Russia and Ukraine rose sharply after the announcement, signaling relief among investors just hours after Russia also ended war games in Crimea, the peninsula it occupied and annexed from Ukraine in 2014. The confirmed pullout of the troops brought in on top of the permanent contingent will likely be welcomed by Western countries that had been expressing alarm at the prospect of further Russian intervention in eastern Ukraine. Russian-backed separatists have been fighting the Ukrainian government in the region since 2014. Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba had told Reuters Kyiv did not know whether Moscow intended to launch an attack or not, and said the West must make clear it would stand with Ukraine if Russia did so. U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price said Washington was aware of Russia's announcement and was watching the situation on the border closely. We've heard words. I think what we'll be looking for is action. Indeed. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on. In fact, we're going to meet up here on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. De novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tombe, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.